This is for all the Christians that think they can disprove the low season theory and that think that the second coming is today. I'm putting all my best points, and if you can disprove them, go ahead and disprove them in the comments. Before anybody says this is Tartaria, just watch my other videos where I explain that these are actually built by the saints, and buildings like this are not Tartarian. These are actually just Roman buildings. Revelation 1:7, he says, "Look, he is coming with the clouds, and every eye will see him, even those who pierced him." Only people back then could have physically pierced him. It is not about us today. And if you are saying it's about us today and that we pierced Jesus, you're already lying and changing scripture for your agenda. So as you can see very clearly here, it says, "For the Son of Man shall come in the glory of his Father with his angels." Then it says, "Verily I say unto you, there should be some standing here which shall not taste death till they see the Son of Man come in his kingdom." So what's he saying? First off, he's talking to his disciples, Matthew, John, James, and he is saying, some of you will be dead by the time I come for my second coming. And as you can see here, it says, he will come with his angels. Has that happened yet? The answer is yes. Tacitus and Josephus, both Roman and Jewish historians, both wrote about Jesus, a prominent figure in the sky, with his angels and chariots over the cities of Israel during the Roman Jewish War. Then we have the fact that Matthew 24:34 tells us, "Truly I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have happened." People always say it's talking about this generation today, but he's saying this again to his disciples. And what is he saying has to happen? What's the first thing in Matthew 24 that he says has to happen before he comes? The second temple falling down. You can't say Jesus said the second temple was going to fall down first, and then now every other sign before his second coming doesn't apply at the same time this applied to. So this happens before he comes, but then we have to wait another 2,000 plus years for the other signs. That makes no sense. You have to agree, if this happened, the others happen too. So in Daniel 9:27, it talks about the second temple falling 3.5 years and the 7 years of tribulation. Also, people use, I don't know why, this verse for a third temple, when very clearly, if you read the Bible, the first temple falls down during Babylon's destruction of Jerusalem with Nebuchadnezzar, and Daniel is writing this during captivity of Babylon. He's prophesying about the next temple, which is the second. He does not skip a second temple and then go to a third one, because he would have said a third one. He's talking about the next second temple. And guess what? Here we have a 7-year war, and then we have the second temple fall 3.5 years, just like Daniel prophesies. Then you have to deal with the fact that every single church John wrote to has not only been buried, but it's been destroyed and will never be built again. So therefore, it is not about churches today, right? It's obviously very clearly about churches back then, because if the Bible was never composed, right, we would just see those as scrolls that were written to churches back then. We would not think of it as prophetic verses given to us and future generations. We would look at it as a historical past. So don't be deceived into thinking you're the special elect he's talking about. All of us are just thinking that because we want to be raptured. Nobody wants to die. But actually take a step back and see if what you're saying is biblical. I also forgot to mention, but in Daniel, this does not happen. There's not a 2,000 plus year church gap. I would love for one verse in Daniel where it says that. There's 7 weeks, which is 49 years. 62, which is 434 years. That's when Jesus has to be born and killed, right? So where are the verses where it just says, oh yeah, and after that there's 2,000 plus years that somehow are fitted into the weeks that he's supposed to be fully fulfilling prophecy? These things are saying what has to happen and when Jesus will die, when he'll be born, and when he comes back for his second coming. But it never says about how many weeks are in between that. So why are now people adding hundreds of weeks? Literally, to get thousands of years, you would have to add hundreds of weeks to this prophecy. Where are those hundreds of weeks missing? Then you have to deal with the physical proof, where you have coins like this where Google and historians will tell us it's 1736, but in reality it always says J or an I, and I is Jesus in Latin, so it'd be Isus, not Jesus in Latin, but it'd be J, and then it would tell you the date you're in the 1,000-year millennial reign. Not many people know, but the second coming is not just Jesus coming back and then new heaven and earth. He only rules for 1,000 years with his saints that he came raised from the dead. Then Satan is released for a little season. Then he has to deceive the nations against Jesus, and then new heaven and earth. So these coins are obviously representing his millennial reign, and there's many. I just don't want to waste people's time. And also, I'm not saying these were made by the saints or Jesus. People lived regularly during the millennial reign, right? These were just made by the people living during the millennial reign. There's all different countries have them. It's not just the millennial reign coin. Then you also have to deal with the fact that every single part of Rome has been buried. And not only was it buried, but it's buried at the same time the churches all fell. And if we look at every other part of the world, then as you can see here in Egypt, it was completely buried. And when you look at it today, it's literally, there's multiple feet that were not shown that are now shown. You know why? Because every single part of the world was in ruins. It was buried. Literally every single part. And if you did not excavate these things, you wouldn't even know they were pyramids. Think about how many mountains and hills that are covered with trees that look like pyramids that will never be found because they're mountains. In order for this to happen, there has to be an excess amount of land being moved all at the same time. How would that happen if it was not for tribulation and Armageddon happening? Like, what caused this event? I need a biblical, prophecy of what this is. Because if we're going to hold everything that happens and through a biblical standpoint as Christians, explain this away. What caused this? What Bible prophecy is this? What Bible prophecy was the second temple falling, if not the ones I'm giving you? None of you are actually explaining what any of these things are. You're just saying what they can't be. So instead of trying to prove us wrong, tell us what it is then, if it's not this. Then in Matthew 24 again it says, "Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains." Josephus and Eusebius both wrote, "But the people of church in Jerusalem have been commanded by a revelation vouchsafed approved men, therefore before the war, to leave the city and to dwell in a certain town of Perea called Pella." So, not only are they writing the fact that Revelation was written before the second temple fell, because this is all talking about events that happened after and before the second temple fell. It's saying they were commanded by revelation, and then they were told to flee to the mountains. And if you see where those mountains are, the mountains of Perea are right in front of Judea. So all they had to do was walk in front. So yet again, Bible prophecy fulfilled. Google says the same thing. It was a refugee spot for Christians who fled the 7-year war. Then he's saying this to his disciples again, not a future generation. This is to his disciples. It says, "When you are persecuted in one place, flee to another. Truly I tell you, you will not finish going through the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes." So what is he saying? You won't even get through all the towns of Israel before I come back for my second coming. So when they try to kill you or throw you in prison for spreading the gospel, just go to another city, because by the time I come back, you won't even get through all the cities. So it'll be worth your time. So explain these verses. And I know most people won't even be at the end of this because they're all going to be trying to disprove it. But if you are here, please just be reasonable and logical. Was this prophecy of the Antichrist? The answer is no. We're in the little season and Jesus already came back. Now, this isn't preterism because I don't believe that all Revelation was completed. I believe we're in Revelation 23 in the little season. Now, people are going, but Bible prophecy, this happened in the third temple is being built in Israel that is founded in 1948 and the gospel's being spread everywhere. Well, first off, if you open your Bible to in Colossians 1:23, it talks about how
The Gospels were already spread to every creature under the earth. You can also read this in Romans. And people think, oh, but what about the third temple? In Daniel 9:27, people go, this is the third temple. First off, read the verse. It's talking about a second temple. You know why? Because if any of you guys actually read your Old Testament, you would know that Babylon captured Israel, which Nebuchadnezzar destroyed. So the first temple was destroyed. Then in Babylon, Daniel is prophesying about the next temple, not a third one. I don't know why we skipped the second. Most people don't even know about the second temple. But this is about the second temple. And there's 7 years of tribulation, and 3.5 years is when that temple falls, right? And as you can see here, we have the 7-year war, the Roman-Jewish war, and the second temple Daniel wrote about fell 3.5 years between that 7-year war. So please tell me, where are the third temple verses? Don't use Thessalonians, because that's about the second temple too. There's no third temple verses, and everything that was written, like Matthew 24 and Matthew 16:28, was about this. Every single Bible verse you guys are trying to say is being completed today, it's not. They're purposely making things seem like Revelation is playing out so people like us can be deceived. The great deception coming is not people taking the mark of the beast. It's people thinking Jesus is coming back for his second coming. So when he doesn't come the way they expect him to, they all fall against him. Revelation 27-10. It says in Revelation 27-10, when 1,000 years are over, Satan will be released and will go out to deceive the nations and will gather them to battle. In number, they are like the sand of the seas. They marched against the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of God's people, which are the saints, the city he loves. Then he sends fire, and then new heaven and earth and white throne judgment. So, first off, people think it's new heaven and earth when the second coming happens. So, throw that out the window. We're in the little season. And then on top of that, as you can read here, this is right after Jesus rules for 1,000 years. So how does Jesus rule for 1,000 years, but then Satan deceives billions of people against him, right? Like, for example, people would not just blatantly follow Satan first off, and they're definitely not going to follow Satan into war against Christ when he just proved himself as God and ruled for 1,000 years on earth. It's obvious that he lies to us, he deceives us in the little season, and makes people in the little season never realize that Jesus came back for a second time. That's how he deceives people to go against Jesus, because people aren't going to know it's Jesus because they're expecting him to come for a second coming. So when he comes down to New Jerusalem, like it says here, and we attack the camp of the saints, which is under Jerusalem, heavenly Jerusalem, we're all going to think it's a big alien ship. Everybody knows New Jerusalem in the Bible is 1,500 miles long and 1,500 miles tall. So it's either a big floating pyramid or a big floating cube. So when that happens, they're all going to be like, oh, the aliens are here. The aliens are here. And then all the people are going to lose faith in Christ because they're going to be like, oh, this isn't in the Bible. This doesn't happen in Revelation. So not only are the Christians going to lose their faith, but then all the atheists are going to go to the people like me in the little season and go, hey, these are aliens. Like, this is the human race versus aliens. They're going to tell us to throw away our stupid book. And if we still decide not to fight against them, we're going to get killed because you're now against the human race. It's not about being racism. It's not about being homophobic or transphobic. It's about being against the human race. That's what will happen. That's where the whole world is going towards. None of these Bible prophecies actually match up with Bible prophecies that you guys are giving. The 1948, that's not the fig tree generation. The Bible is 40 years. A generation of the Bible is 40 years. It's been more than 40 years since the fig tree generation.
There is no third temple in the Bible. I know that people like her will tell you that there is and give you verses like Thessalonians and Daniel. When we actually look over them, it's about the second temple. Before I even get into the verses, I would like for somebody to find one verse where Daniel's 70th week adds now somehow 2,000 plus years. Like, it's called the 70th week for a reason, which means there's only 490 years in the prophecy. So how is it now a 2,500 year long prophecy? Where did that come from? Not in the Bible. In Daniel 9:27, it talks about how the temple has to fall 3.5 years in the 7-year tribulation. And guess what? The second temple fell 3.5 years inside the 7-year Roman Jewish war. So, if that's not Bible prophecy, tell me what that is. Because Daniel very specifically wrote only about the second temple, not a third. As you can see here, Daniel was written after the first temple fell due to Babylon invading. So, how is the next prophecy about the next temple about a third one, and we just skipped the second one that the Jews were actually sacrificing it to God? Back then, the real Jews, not the fake ones today, were actually sacrificing because they thought they were actually sacrificing to God. So the Antichrist came and actually stopped the sacrificing. You're telling me today there's a third temple that they're going to spend billions on and maybe sacrifice once or twice just for it to stop? Does that make any logical sense? And they're going to do that knowing it's Bible prophecy fulfilling Jesus' second coming? Like, what are we talking about? You guys aren't even making sense. Then God literally tells Daniel, don't tell this prophecies to anybody until it's time for the end. But Jesus is quoting him many times in the Bible. So how was it not the end times back then if it's literally said to only give it out to the people of Israel during the end times? Then people use but Thessalonians. No. He was literally writing to people back then. If these letters were not found, we would never assume they were written to us. So stop. These letters were written to people back then talking about the temple then. Did he say a future third temple? No, he's specifically saying to those people who were living, coexisting with the second temple, talking about a temple. He would have specifically said, hey, this isn't to you. This is for your future generation children and grandchildren. There's going to be a future temple. That's when Jesus comes back. He would not confuse people into thinking that's the second temple he's talking about. So use Bible context, use audience relevancy. The Bible was not written to us, it was written for us. Two difference. And if that isn't enough, we know that the end time prophecy, the people from Judea have to flee to the mountains. As you can see down here, here are the mountains of Judea. The only ones that you can possibly flee to in front of Judea would be called Perea. And guess what? Pella was the spot for all the refugee Christians who were fleeing during the tribulation. And Pella is just a city in the mountains of Perea. Both Eusebius and Josephus both wrote about the second temple and the 7 years. And it says, but the people of the church in Jerusalem had been commanded by a revelation, approved men there before the war to leave the city and to dwell in a certain town of Perea called Pella. So, as you can see, they were commanded by a revelation, which not only means they knew that the Bible, like the Gospels, were written to them, but they knew that Revelation was written to them, and Revelation was written before the second temple fell. And if you don't believe me, just believe him. He's literally known as the father of church history, and I don't call people father other than God, but that's what they call him. So he's obviously a reliable source. So literally there's no third temple verses. There's no Bible history supporting a third temple. And if you believe so, you're wrong. But you're always allowed the opinion to disagree. So just comment and prove me wrong if I'm wrong. Oh, and I know there's going to be people talking about, but they're building a third temple. But the Jews are building a third temple. But Trump. Dude, that doesn't make it prophecy. I can myself build a third or fourth temple, say I'm God in the temple, and then be like, that's Bible prophecy. That doesn't make it Bible prophecy. That's not how it works, okay? If it was written about the second temple and the second temple prophecy was already completed, anything that replicates it after is not Bible prophecy. You're just being deceived. The Bible teaches us that these were built by fallen angels and giants. This was not aliens. Now, before people go, the Bible's wrong, aliens are real. Okay, let me prove to you that they're not real and this was fallen angels, because I once believed in aliens too. And then I'm going to tell you how this has to do with Jesus coming back in New Jerusalem. So everybody says the Egyptians, the Mayans, the Aztecs, the rest of the people who have pyramids all built them themselves. But if we actually look, at those people and what they say, they'll tell you themselves, giants and our gods built this. As we can see here, the Aztecs say giants built their pyramid. And according to Mayan tradition, their god built their pyramid in one night. And we know in the Bible that other gods are just fallen angels. That's why the Egyptians that worshiped other gods, they're real things. They're real beings. But they're fallen angels. That's why they're half human, half animal, or just full giant humans. Because in the Bible, it teaches that the Nephilim were either half human and half fallen angel, or half animal, half fallen angel, because eventually they were having babies with the animals too. That's how you get all these half-breed giant animals. So people need to realize this is not aliens. The fact that they want you to think it's aliens obviously should tell you aliens are not real. It's obviously a psyop. And even in the Bible, demons built the temple. Most people don't know that, but King Solomon used demons to build temples. He could manipulate stone with demons. This is with the ring, by the way. That's unheard of technology. People need to realize that we were way more advanced then. We are stupid now. But this is where it gets really interesting, because in Revelation, it talks about New Jerusalem comes down. And before I even explain this, this is for all of the people who think we're in a little season. If you don't know what I'm talking about, watch my other videos, because it's too long to explain it in this short video. But Jesus came back in 70 AD. The 7-year tribulation happened, and Armageddon happened. That's why Rome, Egypt, and the rest of the world are all buried. And we're now awaiting for Revelation 20, 7 through 10 to happen, and New Jerusalem to come. And I think this is why they're slowly releasing the pyramid stuff. Because as you can see here, most people think New Jerusalem is a square or a big cube that's in the sky. But if we actually look at it, I'm pretty sure it's actually a pyramid, which is why our dollar bills have the pyramid and then the all-seeing eye. Obviously, the all-seeing eye is God. So why is there an all-seeing eye on top of a pyramid? Because New Jerusalem is a pyramid. And as you can see here, the dimensions fit perfectly with either a cube or a pyramid. So now when you see something like this floating in the sky, 1,200 miles long and tall, we're all gonna go, it's aliens. It's aliens. This is how Satan deceives the world against Jesus. Now, most people think that Jesus comes back for his second coming, and then boom, new heaven and earth, great white throne judgment, and then it's all over. But it actually teaches that Jesus comes back for his second coming, Armageddon happens during tribulation, then Jesus puts Satan in the pit for 1,000 years and rules for 1,000 years on earth, and then after the 1,000 years, Satan is released for a little season to deceive the world against Jesus. Now, how did the devil deceive the world against Jesus when Jesus was just ruling 1,000 years? Everybody would go, I'm not going to follow you into war against the living God who just proved himself to be living God for 1,000 years. Obviously, he does this by deceiving the world for 100, 200 years and makes them think that Jesus is coming back in the future. Because if you don't think he came back already, then you wouldn't know what to look for when he comes back in New Jerusalem. So when he comes back in New Jerusalem, we're all going to think he's an alien. We're all going to be like, look at that floating pyramid. It's just like the pyramids in Egypt. Those were built by aliens. These are obviously aliens coming back. People who are atheists are going to hate Christians, and the Christians who are going to be reading their Bible going, wait, where is this in the Bible? I thought Jesus was coming for his second coming, 7-year tribulation, third temple. They're going to be confused and lost and lose their faith, and then they're going to go against Jesus too. And the only people who are going to know about this are people who believe in the little season theory. But at that point, people are just going to think we're stupid because there's a big floating city right in the sky, and the government's going to tell us, hey, the good aliens are here to help us. That's why they're slowly introducing the idea of aliens, that there's good aliens, bad aliens. So when Jesus comes, they tell us he's the bad alien. just like Independence Day, the movie, or any alien movie. There's bad aliens and there's good aliens that come to help us, and the whole world has to come together against the bad aliens. Now, I know this sounds crazy, but please think, like, why are they now just releasing the information about the pyramids? Like, why would they want people to know that? They didn't just figure this out. They've always known this. Like, always. So why are they now releasing it? Because they want the idea of aliens and us being more advanced back then, because aliens gave us information and the Anunnaki came from Nubaru or whatever you guys believe in. Like, that's not real. It's not real. Like, you guys have to realize the Bible is the truth. You guys have to stop looking for illogical explanations when there's a book telling you the whole history of the planet. Now, this is a warning. Now, I don't even know if anybody has gotten to this point this far, but if you are, realize that things are slowly going to keep coming out to make the alien deception seem more and more real. Obviously, we know it's a deception, but people are just going to believe it's real. Aliens are going to be real to them. Do not fall for the alien deception. To all my conspiracy theorists and Christians, I got a crazy one for you. I think California is the promised land. I think the Grand Canyon is actual Egypt in the Bible. And then on top of that, I think Jesus came back in 70 AD, which is what fits all this together, which is why you see this place fully nuked. It's actually meltology. This is from tribulation. Pangea is a real event. It didn't happen billions of years ago, though. Just like this didn't happen through billions of years of water erosion. It was during tribulation. Now, before I continue the video, I don't have much time, but please watch my other videos about Jesus coming back, because this won't make sense unless you accept that first, or at least know what I'm talking about. But as everybody can see, this is a bird's eye view of the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon is said to be formed by water erosion, but when you actually look at it,
That's what the Grand Canyon looks like.
the Grand Canyon was very clearly struck by lightning. Now let me show you how it's the promised land in California and Grand Canyon in Egypt. As you see in the 1700s map of America, California, it's its own island, and it has a sea between America and itself. And when you look up the name of that sea, it's translated to the Red Sea, which we all know Moses had to cross. As you can see, it says Gulf of California or Red Sea, and it was an island. Now, if we look at the Grand Canyon and where California is today, they're very close. That is not a super far walk. And when you put the images over each other, Egypt is literally just a little walk before the Red Sea, and boom, promised land. Not only do these look like melted sphinxes and pyramids, but literally there's temples of Osiris, temples of Buddha there, all idol worships there. And in 1909, Teddy Roosevelt was about to close the Grand Canyon due to safety reasons, because they wanted to keep people safe and they wanted to stop from gold mining or whatever. So 90% was closed off. But right before that happened, this guy went to explore, and he found an underground city with temples and Egyptian artifacts, hieroglyphics, but then also Buddhist idols and then Egyptian idols. And he found Egyptian mummy warriors. He documents this in his letter. They say how it looks like Buddha, but they aren't sure. Then he talks about the mummy warriors that obviously had their own little tomb system, which is obviously, like, the pyramids were not Egyptian tombs. Like, the pyramids are for free energy sources. And to think that pyramids would mean it's just, that's Egypt, that's not how that works, because there's pyramids in every single continent. So the pyramids isn't what signifies Egypt, it's the people. Egypt is the people. And this might sound a very unbiblical and just crazy. And to me, I still can't grasp my head around it, but I'm just publishing this because as somebody who calls themselves a journalist, I have to obviously publish both sides. Even if I'm wrong, I'm still trying to put out the truth to see if it could be right. But then we have verses like this where in Matthew 12:1, Jesus and the disciples are eating corn together. Now, if anybody knows about corn, it's only grown in North America. So that's something I'm struggling very much if Israel is Israel today. Then Noah made the ark, which is made only of gopher wood, which is only found in Florida and parts of Georgia. So it's like, okay, then, obviously the United States has many mountains, which Israel is supposed to have in the Bible, but Israel today only has one real mountain, which is Mount Hermon, but like that's it. But California obviously is known as, the hills, right? And like they have palm trees, and there's just something about California. Nobody's dying to go to Israel. Everybody wants to go to California though. Then there's Los Angeles right next to Cali. Then there's all this evilness in Cali. What's with the obsession with California with the evil elites? You know what I mean? What is it?
Then we also have Utah, by the way,
Which is word for word almost identical to the word Judah. So guys, also think about the fact what the heck just caused California not to be an island anymore? That doesn't even make sense. If we're not in the little season, there's no third temple. Nothing that's happening today makes sense with an Antichrist or beast or anything if you actually read your temple. Yes, they're trying to make it seem that way, but if you actually read your Bible, you see right through it, so it's not that. Please, if we're still at this point and you haven't seen my other videos, watch my other videos, because I'm still struggling with this theory of California being a promised land, but it makes sense and other things don't make sense. So if anybody wants to prove me wrong with this, I'm willing to be proven wrong on this. Obviously, I know we're in the little season, but if you want to prove me wrong with this, I'm more than glad to be proven wrong. So this video is about the great ancient war of Armageddon. Now, people might go, doesn't that happen when Jesus comes back? Yes, Jesus already came back in 70 AD, and I might turn a lot of people off. People might go, this is the mud flood, Tartaria. Hear me out, because Tartaria and the mud flood had to do with this, but it's not what you think. So in Daniel 9:27, it just writes about how there has to be a temple that falls 3.5 years and the 7-year tribulation. And Daniel wrote this prophecy 107 years before the second temple was ever even built. And then he prophesied about its destruction hundreds of years before it even fell. Here we have a 7-year tribulation, the Roman-Jewish war, and the second temple he was prophesying about fell 3.5 years in that 7-year tribulation. And then if you don't want to believe the Bible, that's fine, because we have historians like Josephus and Tacitus from the 1st century who talk about seeing a prominent figure over in the sky with angels and chariots during the 7-year tribulation. And then in the Histories chapter 5:13, Tacitus writes about how there was host angels in the sky with chariots, and then the temple doors opened wide, which would not be possible without a few dozen men to open. It opened by itself, and then there was voices saying that God is leaving its presence. This is during the tribulation, where people are eating their kids. Every single prophecy is being fulfilled, and I'm not gonna make a video on all the prophecies fulfilled back then, because this video would be way too long. But just know tribulation did happen. And before I hear anybody say Revelation was written in 96 AD, it was not, okay? As we can see here in this verse, it says, "And there was given unto me a reed like a rod, and then an angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God and the altar, and then worship them." And then it says how they will be trampled over 4.5 years. years. That's how long the temple was trampled for until it fell. And on top of that, we know that Jesus came back, so there wouldn't have to be temples anymore. So there would only be a temple of God back then, before Jesus came back. Like, that temple was made before Jesus came back. That's why it was still the temple of God. But then he left that temple because we are the temple of God now. So now that you guys know tribulation happened, now that you know tribulation happened, let's get into all the destruction. As you can see here, every single church Revelation was written to was all destroyed and buried at the same time. Rome and every great civilization was buried. Now let's talk about these archaeological sites. As you guys can see here, people think on the bottom it's perfectly preserved today. But when you actually look back at old photos, like, it was never preserved. It was always buried, destroyed, and we had to undig them. That's because something buried that. Like, people really need to think hard. Not only who built those back then in BC, but then what happened for this whole thing to be buried like this. Not just this part, but the whole world. Every single civilization was buried. You can literally do this for a day. There isn't a part of the world that was not completely destroyed and buried. And these were all at the same time because of this stratigraphy. Nothing was above or under it. They're all on the same strata level. And places like the Grand Canyon don't make sense from water erosion. The Colorado River did not cause this going uphill. And the Earth is not billions of years old, okay? As you guys saw, with electricity being stuck, that's what exactly it looked like. It's very clear that this whole world was once upon a time nuked. Pangea, I used to think was made up, but I'm really of the belief now that when Jesus came back, islands and mountains move and separate. I think that's exactly what Pangea was. I think that's how the apostles were able to spread the gospel, was because they were able to walk everywhere. They didn't have to sell or do anything. Like, they were just able to walk. And yes, the mud flood is a really very real thing. But it has nothing to do with Tartaria. Now, Tartaria is made up of two different type of buildings. These churches, right, that were built by the saints, because not many people know when Jesus comes back, he only rules for 1,000 years. That died for him during his 1,000 years. Then, little season, which we're in now, and then new heaven and earth, then white throne judgment. And then there's these type of Tartarian buildings. They're Roman buildings. They're not Tartarian buildings. Tartaria is a psyop. They might have been a real thing because they were on many maps, but they did not build all this. As you guys can see, this looks exactly like Venice, Italy, and this is all in America. This is Chicago, Illinois. This is Louisiana.
This is part of Chicago, Illinois World's Fairs. As you can see, this right here is Corinthian pillars and beautiful Roman architecture, and this right here is the Pantheon, right? It's literally an exact replica of the Pantheon. Think about how this is Paris in just the 1900s, and now it's completely dead. They destroyed everything from the Roman Empire in the millennial reign because these buildings would prove that we were not only more advanced, but that Rome was the whole world, and that the architecture right after the Roman buildings were just the churches. Who actually thinks that these were built in the Dark Ages? That lasted 1,000 years, by the way. But people were dying before 30. Babies were barely being born. People lived in woodshed homes. There was no electricity. There wasn't power tools. There was just no development during the Dark Ages. Yet all these beautiful churches that were for free energy, by the way, were all built during that time. Like, that makes no sense. Obviously, the people who are in control now call it the Dark Ages because it was actually 1,000 years of light. These buildings were built to praise Christ and give everybody in the world free energy. And if that isn't enough, we have buildings like this that have a J, as you can see, and then the date of how many years you were in the 1,000-year reign. So you were 772 years in the 1,000-year reign. And we have coins from all over the world that have a J and then the date you were in the 1,000-year reign. Notice how on Google, though, it'll tell you it's a 1 instead of a J. So they could add 1,000 years to our timeline. And even though you guys can't really see that well, there's an M right here that was not there before, which added 1,000 years to the building. To me, it is very clear we're in this verse where the 1,000 years ended and Satan was released to deceive the nations. That is why all the elites worship the devil. Our politicians, our pastors, our teachers, our presidents, anybody who you think is good worships the devil. That is why the Statue of Liberty is just a painting of Satan. The Statue of Liberty is, first off, not a woman, okay? That's why the Statue of Liberty has a broken chain on its foot, because it was loosened after the 1,000 years. And that's why you see these manly fingers grab on this tablet that has Roman numerals, because Rome was the beast. It had the Antichrist and the false prophet. Why would a French artist give a gift to America in Roman numerals? And if that isn't enough for you, look at this painting of George Washington in Washington, D.C. He is surrounded by pagan gods, and he is depicted as Zeus. And the writing on that painting literally reads in English, out of many, one. So he's saying out of many gods, out of all those pagan gods, there's only one. As you can see there, it does tell us that all those people he's like sitting down with, those are pagan gods. So it's saying out of all those pagan gods, there's only one. And the one that it's focused on is Zeus. And we know that Zeus is Satan.
This video is for all the conspiracy theorists in the world that are looking for that one conspiracy theory that connects everything together. We have a community called the Little Season Community, where we truly believe we found everything that connects Tartaria, the Mud Flood, Flat Earth, orphan trains, insane asylums. All that is explained by Jesus coming back in 70 AD and him ruling for 1,000 years. And they added 1,000 years to our timeline, which explains that too. Before I even get in all the other stuff I just talked about, I want us to look at coins like this where it says J and then the date look like this and have an I. And there's multiple examples of coins like this. But I would be Jesus, which is Jesus in Latin, and the J obviously for Jesus. And then the date would tell you what date you're in the 1,000 years. Then we have buildings like this. And we have buildings like this. Now onto Tartaria. As we can see, Tartaria is made up of two type of buildings. Now, when I do this to Tartaria, it's because Tartaria is actually a psyop to make us think that this was us and not Jesus coming back. But as we can see, they're only made up of two type of buildings. Buildings like this that are churches. Buildings like this are actually Roman. As you can see, the Corinthian pillars, which is very Roman architecture. And then that building right there, what does that look exactly like? It looks exactly like the Pantheon. Like, exactly. And as you can see here again, this looks exactly like Venice, Italy. And Rome is in Italy. So, obviously, the inspiration came from Rome. And if you wonder who built these things, well, that was the Vikings that came 500 years before Columbus. And if you don't believe me, just look it up on Google. This is pretty common knowledge. The Vikings were also Roman, and the Arabs were Roman. Islam was probably in the 1st century, and Muhammad was probably the false prophet, but I don't know about that yet. I gotta keep going.
As we can see here in Daniel, he says, the fourth beast is a fourth kingdom that will appear on earth. It will be different from all the other kingdoms, and it will devour the whole earth, trampling down and crushing it. Then when Jesus comes back and destroys it, it says, but the court will sit, and his power will be taken right away and completely destroyed forever. Then the sovereignty and power and greatness of all the kingdoms under heaven will be handed over to the holy people, the saints of the Most High.
So now you know that Rome was Tartaria, and these churches are just the saints that they built for free energy, and they lived inside of the Roman buildings that were handed over to them, like Daniel says. Then we have the mud flood. Buildings like this that were Roman, huge buildings like this in Iraq, and like this too, everything was completely buried, which is unfathomable. Then you combine that with the fact that Jesus specifically said to 7 churches in Asia in Revelation, repent, I'm coming back soon. And if you don't repent, you'll be destroyed. And guess what? All of those churches today were destroyed at the same time Rome was. So who destroyed Rome in the whole world? Because Rome was the whole world. Obviously, Jesus came back and judged the whole world. Do you guys really think that God was going to let his son be killed and not judge the world when he's judged the world for way less? Then we have thousands of examples of photos of children being shipped away on orphan trains. And their parents were being put in insane asylums. So what does that sound like? If you weren't agreeing with their agenda of Jesus not coming back already, you were put in an insane asylum and your kids would be shipped away. Because think about it. These people were just settling in the country, according to our history, and they were building wood huts and shooting each other like cowboys and riding horses. But then you also see insane asylums built at the same time that look like castles. So they were putting the crazy people in castles, but then they went back to their woodshed homes. Like, that obviously doesn't make sense. Obviously, these castles were repurposed. They were here before. And something happened where we lost the technology to build. So we had to restart and start building wood homes, but then repurpose the buildings we had before. And then we see that the world's fairs were selling premature infants for no reason. Nobody knows why, they were just doing it. As we can see here, these babies do not look healthy enough or even old enough to be out the womb. So it's very clear they were like cloning babies. And they were obviously cloning babies to repopulate the world because we just went through a catastrophic event. And this leads me to my next point. As we can see here, this is the Statue of Liberty's book, and it says July 4th, 1776, but in Roman numerals. Remember that. And then you see like witchcraft stuff underneath the Statue of Liberty. This is obviously a big ritual right here. And the statue is obviously Satan. So now that brings me to my point. Us little seasoned theorists believe that Jesus came back when the second temple fell, but I think that this dating is actually wrong because obviously our whole chronology is wrong. So what if the 7-year tribulation actually ended in 1776? Then Jesus establishes his 1,000 years. And 1776 is when Satan is released from his 1,000-year bounding.
As we can see here, it says that he sees the dragon, that ancient serpent who is the devil or Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. He threw him in the abyss and locked him, sealed him in over to keep him from deceiving the nations anymore until the 1,000 years were ended. After that, he must be set free for a short time.
So as you can see, Satan was released after the 1,000 years. And if I'm right about it being 1776, that's why we have the Statue of Liberty in Roman numerals, because the Roman numerals represent the beast, Rome. Rome was the final beast. And Satan controlled the final beast. He's the one who gave the beast power. So he is just Rome reincarnated. That's why when you hear Elon Musk and Trump say we want Rome reincarnated, they're a part of the programming. They're all a part of Satan. They just want Rome to rule the world again. This Rome fanatic we have is actually fantasizing about Satan. So distance yourself from the Roman glorifying, because it's not what you think it is. To anybody who wants to hear how Admiral Byrd in Antarctica, the mud flood, Tartaria, the pyramids that were built by giants, and orphan trains and all that connect, then watch my first part, and this is part 2, so watch the first one. But Jesus came back in 70 AD, and Tartaria is Rome, and pyramids are from the days of Noah, and the churches that we see today, like churches like this, were built in the millennial reign by the saints for free energy. And like Daniel 7 says, they after the beast is taken down, after tribulation, they are given over the homes of the Romans to the saints that died for Jesus. So they didn't have to build homes. They just had to build free things like this for free energy. If you watched my first part, then you know that we little seasonists believe that Jesus already came for 1,000 years and he is now in Antarctica. And as we can see here, Admiral Byrd was telling how we saw Crystal City, Rainbow City, and it was floating. What does that exactly sound like? Obviously New Jerusalem. And then on top of that, and when we look at northern and southern lights, they're very clearly the colors of God's throne in the Bible. So obviously, if you're a flat earther or not, I don't believe that the Earth's magnetic core does this to create the lights or whatever the fuck they tell us. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is obviously caused by something that has an immense amount of radiation and light coming off it. So that's very clearly Jesus. Jesus is our light and our radiation. And when we're in our heavenly bodies, that's probably all the light we need. That's our sun, literally. Some people think that pyramids were built by aliens, Egyptians, or the actual people of that area, or giants, but in reality it was giants, because not only are there no hieroglyphics saying how the pyramids were actually built, but every other pyramid in the world has a civilization that said that they didn't build them and that the giants from the hollow earth or whatever built them. So it's pretty obvious that these pyramids were from the days of Noah and they were flooded. That's why they were all destroyed, and that's probably why the pyramids at Giza are so withered away and eroded away, because of the water damage. But when we look at Egyptian hieroglyphics, we see that their gods are half human, half animal giants, and then the others are obviously giant beings that were obviously created by the fallen angels. These are the Nephilim from the days of Noah. It's very clear that the pyramids are from the days of Noah, and they were used as the energy sources that the giants were building. There's probably pyramids in heaven, and they were trying to recreate that all on earth, because we all know that Satan loves to pervert God's creation and make it his own. Then we have buildings like this from Chicago, where you see Corinthian pillars, the most beautiful buildings you're ever gonna see, and then what appears to be a building that looks exactly like the Pantheon. This building also looks like the Pantheon in Rome, and it's not in Chicago. It's a whole different location. And we're supposed to be told it's built by Tartaria as our conspiracy theory, because we have nowhere else to go. But it's very clearly not Tartaria, because Tartaria buildings are either churches or these buildings, but those are two different types of architecture. So these obviously are Romans. As you can see, the Pantheon in Rome looks exactly like the two other photos I showed you. They have the Corinthian pillars. So whenever you see these are Roman buildings. When I went to DC, I would see all these Corinthian pillar buildings have pagan gods at the top and gold statues of gods outside each building. These were obviously Roman buildings. We did not build these. That makes no sense. This is outside of DC too. Outside of a building. This is obviously pagan worship. And the Tartarian mud flood is not actually a mud flood event. Like, it was not a flood at all, because God only floods the earth once in the Bible and promises to never do it again. But this was just a result of Armageddon and tribulation, and Jesus and Satan and all the angels fighting, and him destroying the world and judging it. That's why Rome was buried. It was just, and not Rome only, like all of the world. Like, as we can see here, it was the whole world buried. I can keep going on for the whole video, but I'm not going to. But think about how many pyramids that we have buried today that we just think are mountains. Think about that. Think about how crazy the world used to look like, and now it was all buried, and none of us today actually put that together. Like, what caused the whole world to be buried? And not only the whole world, but the 7 churches John wrote to in Revelation. If it weren't for King James the Bible would not have been composed in English, and we wouldn't think Revelation was about us today. He only wrote that to them. And then Jesus was telling them, repent, I'm coming back soon, and you're going to be destroyed if you don't repent. And then now they're all destroyed today. So what does that say? It's pretty clear. Then we have Josephus, who said he saw Jesus himself with angels and chariots in the skies over Israel during the 7-year war. And during that 7-year war, the second temple that Jesus prophesied to fall 40 years after he died fell 3.5 years into that 7-year war. Just like Daniel 9:27 tells us, there will be an abomination that causes desolation 3.5 years in the temple of the 7-year tribulation. Then we have people like Eusebius, who is the best historian for early church history and church history in general. It says, but the people of the church in Jerusalem have been commanded by a revelation to leave the city and dwell in a certain town of Perea called Pella. Now, before I even get into this, as we can see here, it said they were commanded by a revelation, which means not only was Revelation written before the destruction of the temple, but they knew it was written to them because they used it as their escape and their instructions to how escape and when to escape. And as you can see here, there's Judea and there's right in front across the mountains, just like Jesus told them. And it also says up here, Pella was a refugee spot for Christians who fled from Jerusalem during the Great Jewish Revolt War. So as we can see here, not only is Eusebius telling us Revelation was written before 70 AD, but so is Google, because even though they won't admit it, they have to technically admit it because these things are historical. These things can't happen though if Revelation wasn't written before 70 AD. And if you don't believe that Rome is actually the sea and the whole world, like, look at their logo and look at the United States. And when I went to the Abraham Memorial, they had the olives and then the eagles. And then they had a very demonic painting. When I was in DC, I was trying my best really to decipher the art, and I think I kind of have it. But if you zoom in, there's 3 different deities. The one with the wings, and then 2 women here with green olive crowns, and she has a gold olive crown in the middle. She's the main one they're worshiping. And then the other green ones have people offering them things, and then we have naked little children with them, with the parents. So I'm not sure if they're offering naked children, because we know how Old Testament was. But the first painting, the lady's wings are down and her hands are down while they're offering and worshiping. And then in the second painting, and as you see right here, now the naked little children are gone. And now she has her full power, her wings are spread, and her hands are up. And now there's guards at their hands. I'm not sure if I'm interpreting it wrong, but did they offer the children over to the false idols, like the fallen angels? And if that's true, why is this painting inside of the Abraham Lincoln Memorial? Obviously, this was a temple before Abraham Lincoln. As you can see, it says in this temple. Now, I don't know if Rome actually built this temple or if it was U.S. citizens that actually built it or whatever, and they faked the construction photos, but clearly they're basing it off of Roman-esque architecture. Like the statues of our presidents, that's just Rome reincarnated with their kings and emperors as statues. Like, we're just Rome again. But that's because we're in the Satan little season, and he was the beast that controlled Rome. And he's trying to reincarnate it because he has power again.